am telling you, he actually thinks I love him. This man cooked for me last night, lit candles and everything. Once the permanent residency comes through, I am done. I already have a plan. He is a good man, yes. But a good man was never the point. The point was always the papers, Chisom. You worry too much, he will never find out. Men like Daniel never find out.
Daniel heard everything. He had come home early that Tuesday evening carrying a bottle of wine under his arm, her favorite, the kind she always said tasted like something worth celebrating. He had been thinking about it since his lunch break, turning it over quietly in his mind the way he turned most good things over, carefully, with full attention, making sure it was right before he acted on it. 3 years of marriage, and he still looked for reasons to make Vivian smile. Not because he felt he had to, because it was simply the kind of man he was. The kind who noticed when her shoulders were tight before she mentioned she was tired. The kind who drew her bath without announcement. The kind who believed, without apology and without condition, that love was something you showed in the small moments, not just the large ones, not just the ones people could see and applaud. He turned his key in the lock softly, not wanting to startle her. The flat was warm, the bedroom light was on, and her laughter, that light, easy, rolling laughter he had fallen completely in love with 3 years ago at his cousin's wedding in Enugu, was drifting through the hallway door like it belonged to someone who had not a single worry in the world. He almost knocked. He almost smiled and knocked and walked in and held up the wine and watched her face do that thing it did when she was genuinely surprised and genuinely pleased. Then he heard his name. He heard it the way you hear something in a dream, familiar and close and completely, fundamentally wrong. She said his name the way a person says the name of something they have been carrying too long and are almost ready to put down. Casual, slightly tired, unbothered. And then she said the rest of it, and every word arrived in that narrow hallway like something dropped from a very great height. He actually thinks I love him. Once the permanent residency comes through, I am done. Men like Daniel never find out. He stood in the hallway for 4 minutes and 22 seconds. He would know this later because his phone was in his hand and the screen was on and the time was right there, though he could not have said what he was looking at or why. The wine bottle was still under his arm. The hallway light buzzed faintly above him. Behind the closed door, Vivian laughed again at something Chisom said. Relaxed, comfortable, completely certain she was alone inside her secret. She was wrong. Daniel set the wine bottle down on the hallway floor. He set it down the way you set something down when you know you will not be picking it up again. He straightened his shirt. He turned around, walked back to the front door and pulled it close behind him without a sound. He sat in his car for a long time. He did not cry. Not that night. Not for many nights after. What happened instead was something quieter and considerably more dangerous than tears. Something in Daniel settled, the way the surface of deep water settles after a stone has gone all the way through it. Still on top, completely altered underneath. He sat in the dark of the car park outside their building and he breathed, and he let the truth of what he had just heard arrange itself into something he could hold and examine and understand. Then he drove to Tobias. Tobias opened the door at 10:15, took one look at Daniel's face and stepped back without a word. That was the thing about Tobias. He had been his closest friend since secondary school in Port Harcourt. He knew every version of Daniel's face, and he knew, looking at this one, that words were not the first thing required. They sat in Tobias's kitchen until well past 2 in the morning. Daniel spoke slowly and carefully, the way a man speaks when he is trying to construct meaning out of something that carries none. He told Tobias everything: the hallway, the laughter, the words, the 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Tobias listened without interrupting, without expressions of outrage or pity, without filling the silence with anything unnecessary. When Daniel finished, Tobias looked at him for a long moment and said only this: "Whatever you decide, do it clean." Daniel nodded once. That was the last night he was uncertain about anything. He went home before Vivian woke the next morning. He showered. He made breakfast: eggs, toast, fresh orange juice, the full thing. The kind of breakfast she always said made her feel like they were in a hotel. He kissed her cheek when she came downstairs. He asked about her night and listened while she told him she had been tired, had spoken to Chisom briefly, and had missed him. He looked at her face while she said it, really looked, and saw, for the first time with clear and unobstructed vision, what had always been operating just beneath the warmth she performed so fluently. A careful, constant distance. A woman always slightly behind her own eyes, watching, calculating, managing the impression she was making at every moment. He wondered how long he had been too in love to see it. He ate his eggs, he washed his plate, he told her he had an early side visit and left. He called a solicitor that afternoon. A good one, the kind recommended by someone who had been through something similar and come out the other side with everything intact. What followed were 3 months that nobody watching from the outside would have been able to interpret correctly. Daniel did not change toward Vivian in any way she could measure. He came home, he was present, he was warm in the ordinary daily way she had come to rely on and take completely for granted. He remembered her preferences. He did not start arguments. He did not grow cold or distant or suspicious in any of the ways that might have alerted her that the ground beneath her plan had shifted. But beneath the surface of that ordinary life, he was doing something she would never have imagined him capable of doing. He was building his exit with the same quiet, thorough care he once used to build their future together. He documented everything: dates, patterns, the precise and consistent way her warmth intensified before every immigration appointment and diminished immediately after. The way she always took her phone to the bedroom and closed the door when she spoke to Chisom. The way she had begun, subtly, casually, as if thinking out loud, asking questions about lease agreements, about what happened to joint accounts when circumstances changed, about friends who had flats with spare rooms. He kept records. He met with his solicitor every 2 weeks. He moved his savings to careful legality into an account she had no access to. He spoke to the immigration authority and fully understood, as a sponsor, exactly what his options were and exactly what withdrawing sponsorship would mean for a permanent residency application still in process. He was ready, long before Vivian knew anything was wrong. Vivian, meanwhile, was in full celebration mode. Her permanent residency approval was progressing beautifully, and she could feel it getting closer, the way you feel a destination getting closer on a long road. The anticipation building, the restlessness growing, the patience wearing thin. She video called Chisom nearly every evening. She had started making quiet plans, mentioning a girlfriend's flat she might stay in for a while, asking Clifford, a man she had reconnected with from her university days in Nsukka, whether he was still in London and whether he was still interested. Clifford was very much still interested. He was tall, well-dressed, worked in finance, and had always wanted Vivian back from the moment she had chosen Daniel over him years ago. He did not ask too many questions about her marriage. He simply made himself available and attentive and told her everything she wanted to hear. Vivian believed every word. She thought she was being so careful about all of it. She had no idea that careful was the one thing Daniel had quietly become. The approval letter arrived on a Thursday. Vivian found it in the post while Daniel was at work, and she held it with both hands in the kitchen, still in her robe, reading it twice with a smile she did not bother to control or conceal. She called Chisom immediately. She called Clifford immediately after that. By the time Daniel came home that evening, she had composed herself back into the version of herself she showed him. Warm, easy. "Good day?" she asked from the kitchen. "Very good," Daniel said. He set down his bag. He looked at her. "Yours?" "Fine," she said, quiet. He nodded. He went upstairs to change. When he came back down, she was stirring something on the stove. And he stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, watching her, and felt the full weight of everything he was about to do settle in his chest, like something solid and permanent. "I am cooking tonight," he said. "Sit down." She looked at him with mild surprise. He was already moving to the stove, already gently taking the spoon from her hand, already doing what Daniel always did, taking care of things without being asked. He cooked her favorite meal: jollof rice, fried plantain, peppered chicken, the full thing. The kind of meal she had told him early in their marriage reminded her of Sunday afternoons in her mother's house in Enugu. He set the table, he lit a candle, he poured water into both glasses and called her when it was ready. Vivian sat down and looked at the table, and something moved briefly across her face, something that lived in the same neighborhood as guilt without quite being it, before she folded it back and smiled. "What is all this for?" she asked. "Sit, eat, we will talk." They ate. Vivian talked lightly and carefully about nothing consequential, a program she had watched, something Chisom had said, a restaurant she wanted to try. Daniel listened and nodded and refilled her water glass twice. When the plates were cleared and the candle had burned down to a low, steady flame, he folded his hands on the table and looked at her with eyes that had nothing hidden in them anymore. "Your residency renewal," he said. "There is something you need to know." Vivian tilted her head with practiced ease. "What about it?" "It has been denied," Daniel said calmly. "I withdrew my sponsorship this morning." The silence that followed was the most complete silence that had ever existed in that flat. Vivian stared at him. Something behind her eyes rearranged itself rapidly. The performance shifting, the calculation running, the warmth she had deployed so expertly for 3 years, flickering and failing all at once. She saw in his face, finally and far too late, that he had known for longer than she could calculate, that the dinner and the candle and the favorite meal were not a gesture of love. They were a closing statement. "Daniel!" Her voice came out wrong, too high, too exposed. "I heard you," he said, simply, without heat. "The night you told Chisom about the papers, I stood in the hallway for 4 minutes and I heard every word." Her mouth opened, nothing followed. "I am not angry," he said. And the devastating thing, the thing that would stay with her long after everything else, was that it was completely true. He did not look angry. He did not look hurt. He looked like a man who had completed something, who had measured it and checked it, and now was simply done with it. He stood. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. "The flat is yours until the end of the month. My name is already off the joint account. My solicitor will contact you about the remaining formalities." "You cannot do this." Her voice was rising now, the composure cracking open at every seam. "You cannot simply—" Daniel walked to the front door. He turned once, just once. "You should have married someone who didn't listen," he said, and he closed the door. Chisom arrived within 40 minutes, loud, furious, full of instructions nobody could use. She knocked until the door shook. She called Daniel's number until he stopped picking up, which was after the third call. She stood on the pavement in the cold London night, telling Vivian exactly what to say and exactly who to call and exactly how this could still be salvaged. But Daniel had been thorough in the way that only a quiet, deliberate man who has made a completely final decision can be thorough. The sponsorship was withdrawn through every proper legal channel. His solicitor's letter arrived Friday morning before Vivian had slept a single hour. His name was gone from everything that had both of their names on it. There was nothing to grab hold of, nothing to negotiate, nothing to appeal to. Vivian did the only thing left available to her. She called Clifford. Clifford came. He was sympathetic and attentive and said all the right things. He moved her out of the flat at the end of the month and into his spare room, and then, within 6 weeks, into his bed. Vivian told herself this was how it was always going to go anyway. Just faster, just messier than planned. She told herself Clifford was what she had actually wanted. She told herself the Daniel chapter was simply a means to an end, and the end had arrived, and that was fine. She almost believed it. Clifford's flat was beautiful. Clifford's life was beautiful. He wore good suits and drove a clean car and took her to restaurants where the menu had no prices on her side. Vivian settled in quickly, the way she settled into everything, watching, adapting, making herself indispensable before the man in question thought to question whether he needed her. But Clifford was not Daniel. Clifford did not notice when her shoulders were tight. Clifford did not draw her bath or cook without being asked, or remember the small things she mentioned once and never repeated. Clifford was generous with money and stingy with everything else. Attention, patience, the ordinary daily warmth that Vivian had taken for granted for 3 years, and now, without warning, found herself missing in ways she did not want to examine too closely. She did not examine them. She pushed the feeling down and focused on the practical reality of her situation, which was that her immigration status was now a problem requiring urgent and expensive resolution, and Clifford's resources were the most immediate solution available. She began, carefully and systematically, to work on Clifford the way she had worked on Daniel. The warmth, the attentiveness, the careful performance of a woman fully devoted to the man in front of her. She suggested they formalize things. She brought up the future in soft, non-threatening ways. She made herself easy to be around and quietly difficult to imagine being without. Clifford was not as straightforward as she remembered him from university. He enjoyed her company enormously. He told her so regularly. But every time the conversation drifted towards something permanent, toward paperwork, toward formal arrangements, toward anything that would require him to sign his name next to hers on an official document, he found a reason to change the subject. A meeting he had forgotten, a call he needed to make, a topic he preferred. Vivian pushed gently, then less gently. Clifford smiled and said they had time. Time, Vivian was discovering, was the one thing she was rapidly running out of. Her immigration situation deteriorated over the following months, the way these things do, slowly and then suddenly, with costs at every stage and outcomes that grew less favorable the longer things remained unresolved. She hired a solicitor with money she borrowed from Chisom. The solicitor was good, but the situation was complicated. A sponsorship legally and properly withdrawn by a spouse during an active application left marks on a file that were not easy to explain away. The community did not help. Tobias had not spoken loudly. He had not needed to. The story of what Vivian had done and what Daniel had discovered moved through the Nigerian community in London the way truth moves through close communities, without announcement, without drama, arriving in the knowledge of person after person until there was almost no one left who did not know the outline of it. Women who had once smiled at Vivian at church events looked through her at the supermarket. Invitations stopped arriving. The warm, interconnected social world she had inhabited beside Daniel became cold and distant and quietly closed. Chisom told her to ignore it, to focus on Clifford, to make it work. Vivian tried, but Clifford was growing tired in ways that were becoming impossible to disguise. The generosity remained, but the warmth was cooling. He started taking calls in other rooms. He started mentioning a colleague at work, a woman named Rosaline, with a frequency and a casualty that Vivian recognized immediately, because she had once been that frequency and that casualty in someone else's story. The morning she found Rosaline's earring on the bathroom shelf was a Tuesday. She held it in her palm and stood very still in Clifford's beautiful bathroom and felt something arrive in her chest that she did not have a clean name for. Something that combined humiliation and exhaustion and a grief that went deeper than Clifford, deeper than London, all the way back to a hallway and a closed door and a man who had cooked her favorite meal and looked at her without anger and told her simply that she should have married someone who didn't listen. She put the earring down on the shelf. She walked out of the bathroom. She did not say anything to Clifford that morning. She needed to think. She needed to plan. She needed, and this realization arrived with a particular bitterness. She needed someone to help her, the way she had always needed someone to help her. And the person who had always helped her quietly and completely and without keeping score was no longer available to be used. 3 weeks later, Vivian's solicitor delivered news that removed the last option she had been holding on to. Her application, given the circumstances of the withdrawal and the timeline of the case, could not be successfully progressed. The realistic outcome, absent a new qualifying relationship that could be properly documented and verified, which took time she did not have, was that she would need to return to Nigeria while pursuing any further avenue from there. She called Chisom and cried for an hour. Chisom told her to call Daniel, to explain, to apologize, to appeal to the man she knew he was, the good, patient, generous man who had never once, in 3 years of marriage, raised his voice at her or denied her anything she asked for. Vivian sat with that suggestion for 2 days. Then she called him. Daniel picked up on the third ring. "Vivian," he said, just her name, nothing else. She had prepared something to say, a speech almost, carefully constructed, with the right notes of genuine regret and vulnerability. She began it. She spoke about how much she had made a mistake, how she understood now what she had thrown away, how she was in a very difficult position and she knew she had no right to ask, but she was asking anyway because she had nowhere else to turn, and he had always been... Daniel said. She stopped. "I know about Clifford. I knew about Clifford before you left the flat." Silence. "I know about the solicitor. I know about the application. I know about the timeline." A pause. "Tobias keeps me informed of what I need to know." She could not speak. "I want you to hear me clearly," Daniel said. "I am not going to help you, not because I am angry. I told you the night I left, I am not angry. But I am also not foolish, and I am not available. Whatever happens next happens without me." "Daniel, take care of yourself, Vivian." He ended the call. The deportation order did not arrive dramatically. These things rarely do. It arrived in an envelope in the Morning Post on a day that looked like any other day. Vivian sat on Clifford's sofa, She was still at Clifford's, had nowhere else to go, and Clifford had not yet found the precise moment to ask her to leave, though that moment was clearly approaching. And she opened the envelope and read it twice. Chisom came over. They sat together in Clifford's living room, and Chisom held her hand and said things that were meant to be comforting and were not. Clifford came home, saw the situation, and went very quiet in the way of a man calculating his own exposure to someone else's problem. He asked her that evening, gently and with genuine discomfort, how long she thought she would need before she had somewhere to go. Vivian looked at him. She had no answer. She flew back to Nigeria on a Thursday morning. Chisom came to the airport. There was not much to say that had not already been said, or that words could adequately address. They held each other at the departure gate for a long time. Then Vivian picked up her bag and walked through, and did not look back. The flight was 7 hours. She spent most of it looking out the window at nothing. She thought about Daniel's flat, the hallway. The candle on the dinner table burned all the way down. The bottle of wine he had set on the floor and never picked up again. The way he had looked at her across the table, not with anger, not with grief, but with the clear, settled expression of a man who had made a decision and was completely at peace with it. She understood now, at 30,000 feet, going home to a life she had not maintained because she was so certain she was never coming back to it. She understood now what she actually had and what she had actually done with it. The understanding did not help, but it was the one true thing she had left, and she held it. Daniel was in his kitchen on a Saturday morning when Tobias called to tell him
Vivian had landed in Nigeria. He was making breakfast, eggs, toast, fresh orange juice. He listened to Tobias speak and looked out the window at the street below. The ordinary Saturday morning street with its ordinary Saturday morning life moving through it, and felt nothing dramatic, no triumph, no residual grief, just a clean, quiet sense of completion, of something that had needed to be finished, being finished. "All right," he said. "Thank you for letting me know." He finished making his breakfast. He sat at the table alone and ate it slowly, without rushing. The flat was his now, fully, entirely, without any portion of it belonging to someone else's plan. He had repainted the bedroom in the weeks after she left, a warmer color than before. He had moved the furniture around until it felt like his own space, and not the space of a life he had been building for someone who never intended to stay in it. He poured a second cup of coffee. He had a friend coming for lunch, a woman named Eunice who worked at the firm 2 floors below his office, who had the kind of laugh that arrived without calculation, and the kind of eyes that looked at you directly and without agenda. They had been talking for 2 months. Nothing had been said or decided, but there was something there, something honest and unhurried and completely free of the performance he now knew to watch for. He was in no rush. For the first time in years, he had the extraordinary luxury of no rush, of moving towards something good at exactly the right speed, of not managing anyone's impression of him, or performing warmth he did not feel, or sustaining a life built on a foundation he had not been allowed to know was hollow. He washed his cup. He straightened the kitchen. He went to the window and stood there for a moment in the morning light. Outside, the street was full of ordinary life going about its ordinary business. People walking dogs and carrying shopping and doing all the small, unremarkable things that make up a real life honestly lived. Daniel watched it for a while. Then he smiled quietly to himself, the kind of smile that does not need an audience, and went to get ready for lunch. Was Daniel right to destroy her papers and send her back? Or did he go too far? Drop your comment below. We want to hear what you think. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. and drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.